Salve Maria. Today we shall be meditating about the fifth word of our Lord on the cross. So with a spirit of prayer, let us enter into this meditation. Perhaps we may say that man could live at least for a few days without food in such a situation. But to survive without a single drop of water is something impossible. Water is something so necessary for living that we cannot imagine how to live without water. Jesus, at this moment of his passion, had suffered a great loss of blood due to the terrible wounds caused by the scourging, the crowning of thorns, and all the other beatings. Because of this, he also started to suffer a great thirst that was unimaginable. Then he said, "I thirst." At that moment, a certain Roman soldier offers Jesus some gall and vinegar, but when it was offered, Jesus refused to have it. So what was this thirst in reality? This thirst which the heart of Christ was burning was nothing else but his desire to fulfill the word of the Eternal Father. He perfectly understood that his mission was to accomplish the will of the Eternal Father, who desired that he offers himself completely for the sake of mankind. Therefore, we could summarize the life of Christ with these words, "I thirst." His life was nothing but a journey that was full of a great thirst to obey the will of the Father, a great thirst to accept whatever hardships the Eternal Father desired him to accept, a great thirst to save the souls who come across his path. That is why Jesus says clearly in the Gospel, "Because I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me." During his earthly journey, Jesus desired nothing else but to serve his Father in heaven. But we should question ourselves. Are we ready to do the will of the Eternal Father in all things? Are we ready to sacrifice our self-will and all our selfish desires? As we, children of Adam, are conceived and born with original sin, we too have within us a selfishness that demands always to please the bad desires within ourselves. We have within our souls that roots of the 7 capital sins. These vices make us thirsty for earthly pleasures and leads us to forget God. Let us take an example from the Old Testament. David, who had received the glory of being the greatest king of Israel, had the misfortune of committing a terrible sin. One particular day, he happened to stay in his palace, resting, while his army had been engaged in a combat. Although it was his responsibility to accompany his army, he happens to remain, most probably out of laziness. Having woken up from his seat, he goes to the terrace and sees a certain lady. Her name was Bathsheba. Lust enters his heart and he did not resist against the temptation. Finally, his lust makes him commit another sin. He murders Uriah, the husband of Bathsheba, in order to hide his crime. This seemingly innocent vice of laziness led him to commit some monstrous deeds. This is why it is important to fight against even the least vice within our soul. All these vices, if they are not fought against at their very beginning, it can be strong enough to lead our souls towards destruction. So whenever we see such vices entering into our life, we must remember the punishments of hell that awaits all those who sell their souls to such vices. These bad habits make us burn with a thirst to please ourselves. But trying to do so, we shall never attain true happiness, but sadness and disgust. Considering the vice of impurity, we see how much destruction it brings to people's life. How many families are ruined by separation and divorce? How many young children have ruined their future by addictions to watch and read immoralities? How many parents have been cruel enough to destroy the right of living to their unborn children? How many people have lost their faith and apostatized? All because of impurity. But the same thing can be applied to the other vices. These vices make our souls thirst with worldly desires. The demon keeps fooling us by tempting us to think that by pleasing these sinful desires, we shall be happy. Nevertheless, we end up gaining nothing but frustration and disappointment. It is important to understand that when we lose our thirst for heavenly things and everything that is related to our faith, we eventually become conquered by thirst for worldly pleasures and sins that are linked with them. Saints were men and women who during their life were burning with a thirst for heavenly Jerusalem, and this thirst was satisfied when they reached heaven. But how sorrowful is the destiny of those who burn with a thirst for sinful pleasures. They shall suffer and burn with this thirst for all eternity. So, let us thirst for sanctity, let us thirst for heaven. And this season of Lent is a time that invites us to stop running miserably after this empty mirage and to reflect whether we thirst like Christ with a desire to fulfill God's will and His commandments, or whether we thirst for worldly pleasures or sinful desires. Let us examine whether we truly desire for heavenly things. May God bless you. Salve Maria.